I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at financial planning professionals and also those who are looking to enter the financial planning profession. We will be talking during the podcast about all things Certified Financial Planner certification related, talking to other CFPs around the world, and also we will be dropping in on some new entrants who've just entered the financial planning profession, and we'll be checking up along the way on a regular basis with them to see how they're getting on. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. And today's podcast episode is a very, very special one because I am joined by Dr. Moira Somers, all the way from Canada, who is talking to us about all the psychology of asking the right questions and how that overlaps in financial advice. Welcome, Moira. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's delightful to be with you.
Now, we have lots to get through in the next 40 minutes or so. So I'm going to dive straight in and ask you all about how you got interested in the psychology of financial advice.
I've worked for years as a neuropsychologist, Jackie, working with people in some of the worst times of their life. And one of the things that became really clear early on was how much money played a role in the eventual outcome. In Canada, we have a national healthcare system. And so it wasn't necessarily about access to healthcare, that kind of financial well-being, but it was about people's relationship to money, and whether they had done the right things with their money, including the right kinds of conversations about money prior to their illness or accident that really contributed to how stressed they were through their recovery process and how stressed their families were. And so I began to be really interested in this whole notion of money and well-being quite early on in my career. That overlapped with the work I was doing at the medical school, which was around, has always been around the notion of what makes it so hard for people to do the right things with with the advice that they get. You know, it's often an issue of not so much of knowing what to do, but how actually to follow through with advice. So at some sweet point in my life, those two areas came together. How do we help finances really support people's well-being? And how do we help people follow solid financial advice? And that's what led to me being here today.
That's fun. It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? And I know that I've read reports of you saying that I think 38% of Canadians say that money's their number one source of stress. And only last week I saw a report, I think it was from Legal & General actually, who said that their recent research showed that 68% of 50 to 64-year-olds are actually returning to work after retiring during the pandemic. And they're going back to work now purely because of their money worries.
Wow, that's shocking.
It's fascinating. And you kind of think, actually, for those people, you know, that's a lot of very stressed people out there at a time when, you know, I think particularly if you decided to retire and stopped working and having to go back again, you know, psychologically speaking, that must be extremely difficult.
I think it is, especially if it's not bigger issues of meaning or social engagement that are driving that choice, if it's purely a financial reason. On the other hand, it has a way of sort of focusing the mind, doesn't it? It kind of takes away choice elements sometimes that may make it simpler for people to go. But, you know, obviously hearts are heavy when there's financial stress involved and when you're really concerned about not being able to make basic payments that you need to be making.
Yeah, very difficult. And I think particularly with the way markets are and, you know, with the recession and with everything that's going on in the world, all the dreadful things that are happening, there's a lot of background stress for individuals anyway, isn't there? Just coming to terms with all of that, as well as trying to, manage your own individual finances, and then whether you should seek advice and the cost of advice and how accessible it is, all kind of goes into this melting pot of making it, very testing times at the moment.
On the other hand, there's never been a time in human history when people have had quite as much disposable income as they've had, or access to really solid advice in a way that isn't just reserved for the elite. And so it's not all a picture, it's not exclusively a picture of stress and gloom and doom, but also of how do we help people really lean into the opportunities that are there, and how do we help them do hard things and make decisions with greater confidence, even in the face of uncertainty. I think those are the upsides for us as practitioners, wherever we are.
Yeah. And I was just saying off air, one of the examples that I would give is, when I was in my early 20s, there was a GP couple that I was advising, and I was just getting into financial planning, just starting to explore spreadsheets, and the first UK financial planning software had just been developed. So it's in its very early rudimentary stages. And I'd seen these clients for a few years. They came in for their annual review and they kind of behaved a bit differently. And I kind of tweaked that something was going on, but I hadn't really kind of cottoned on to what was happening. And I had, as many financial advisors at the time, many financial planners do as well, have had my agenda with my set questions. And I got to the bit on my questions and I said, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And they looked at each other and looked back at me and said, divorced. And I nearly fell off my seat. I was absolutely horrified. And I think, for me, I felt that I didn't know how to deal with a situation like that. So how could or how should I have dealt with something like that?
Oh, mercy, Jackie. That's a hard one. I think most of us would have been stopped in our track by that. And so, just finding a way to be able to say something along the lines of, tell me more. Tell me more. And if you need a moment to recover with that kind of disclosure, to be able to say, to tell you the truth, I was not expecting this. But I am glad that you told me, and let's figure out what is the most important thing for us to accomplish in our meeting today. Mm. In other words, you don't pretend the emotion isn't in the room. You give yourself a moment to regulate yourself and to get yourself on track, and then you figure out, what do they want?
Yeah.
So that you take yourself out of the position of having to be the mind reader or the one who knows the perfect thing to say, and just lean in and discover what would be the best use of the meeting time for that day, up to and including, is this the best time and is this the best format? Yeah.
And it's,
oh boy, that's a rough start for a meeting.
It was, yeah. And you're right. I mean, I can't actually remember what I said in response to it, but I think I'm sure that I didn't acknowledge it properly. And I think clients want to be heard, don't they? They want to be acknowledged and valued. So it should be about them, not about, as you say, me internalizing how I felt at the time.
Right. But if you don't acknowledge what you feel at the time, it's going to be driving the bus anyway. So finding a way to be able to deal with it and to welcome everything into the room, so that you can move forward. That is one of the reasons that I wrote the book that I wrote for financial advisors, because I very quickly became aware how much you folks get told by your clients.
Yeah.
You are often, for example, outside the physician's office, the first person to be told of a new diagnosis.
Yeah.
You may be the first person to even detect cognitive decline in a client well before the physician, for example. You may be among the first person that gets told of an intent to divorce. In fact, you may be told it before the spouse gets told it. And that is layered on top of what is already this background of heightened emotionality that comes with the territory of working with people and their money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what's true is that you almost need to think of technical skills and personal skills or interpersonal skills as kind of the right hand and the left hand, the right side and the left side of the body. If you don't have technical skills, if you're not competent and ethical in those areas, then you are then you're a ticking time bomb.
Yes.
And if you're giving bad advice, then clearly that's an issue for regulators and public protection to deal with. We need technically competent professionals, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, though, that it's that the interpersonal stuff isn't important, because in the end, people will take your competent, ethical, technical advice and they'll put it through their personal filter of, did I understand that? Does this make sense to me? Do I agree with this? Is this on track with what's really important for me? And if you can't deliver that advice in a way that makes it through the personal filter of the client, then it just won't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's very much the same as in medicine. I can know exactly the right antihypertensive medication to give to somebody, but if I don't know the questions that allow me to sensitively find out, can the patient afford this medication? Can I make it clear that if the patient is having sexual side effects with this medication, that they feel really comfortable in coming to me with that? Can I make sure that they have the memory capacity to take it regularly, or to even have access to the pharmacy where they might get it? Those last 3 or 4 things that I mentioned, Jackie, of course, have nothing to do with whether that medicine is the technically correct one. Yeah. But it has everything to do with whether that technically correct medicine is going to be taken. So we need, my aim is to see the same revolution take place within financial planning fields as has taken place within the field of medicine, which is recognizing there's a whole lot more that goes into follow through than simply having the correct forms and the correct advice.
And there is a balance, isn't there? Because you have to get to a point where you can connect, like you say, so that the information and the recommendations you're making, that you're a guiding hand and it gets through their filter, so they understand why you're asking them to take a particular course of action, like you do with a particular set of tablets or something. But I think for many financial planners, there's a difficult, where does the professional line, where's that drawn? Because in order to connect, you kind of need to be not quite their friend, but nearly their friend. Do you? Or is it just about your approach?
I don't think that friendship is required, but I do think that some of the elements of friendship are there, like, for example, empathy. Mm-hmm. Like the ability to go beyond just surface level listening, like the willingness to be the umbrella on a rainy day, to go above and beyond what, for example, somebody at a robo-advisor center might be able to provide. People lean into professionals who not only give solid advice, but who do a whole bunch of other kinds of emotional labor with them, who help them feel comfortable and confident, who help them feel less worried as a result of their encounters with you, safer. And they feel best with advisors, advice givers who help them get into action so that they don't have a whole lot of regrets at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, there are boundaries we have to respect. I'm sure that you, like most of the people on this call, sometimes come home from the office and just with this exasperated, if they just listened to me, I wouldn't be in this situation. And so there's also internal work we have to do as advisors, which is how do we not develop a serious drinking problem when that kind of stuff is going on? How do we get better at being the kind of people that folks will listen to? And how do we have the right kind of humility that while we are the expert on a whole lot of things, they are actually the expert on their life and their bandwidth and their relationships, and their sense of timing, even if it might have been different from what we had hoped, and even if it wasn't sufficient to avoid some really negative outcomes. What do we do now that those bad outcomes have arrived? What could we do that would be even better than what we tried to do before to help people get back on track?
And I think one of the other issues for me is that many financial advisors position themselves as the kind of fixer that, like you said in your medical example, I could give you the tablets and you'll be fine. But there needs to be a shift because you're not fixing it, are you? You're not waving a magic wand. You're helping them on their journey to get what they want out of life.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're fixing. I can think of some things that my accountant has done that has not even fixed. It's been more important than that. It's prevented, right? Your really good accountant saves you from the world of heartache that you didn't know you could have been courting without them. Same with a financial advisor. So sometimes there are fixes and some that prevent calamity or that correct mistakes that you have made as a client or that previous financial advisors have made. But if you can be thinking about plan delivery and plan implementation as something that you do together, not as, where you're the oracle and you just dispense wisdom from on high and leave them to do a lot of the heavy lifting, but also that you have the skills to fully engage with clients' hearts and minds so that you know that you're acting on the most important things.
Yeah. Let's move on because I wanted to talk to you certainly in the UK, and I think because maybe accelerated because of COVID, is that we talk a lot about our well-being, and it seems to me as this it's kind of an intangible thing and a fluid thing that it means different things to different people. What does well-being mean?
Yeah, I do think that is something that is worthwhile noodling over with every client that you have in front of you. What does the good life mean? And for most people, Jackie, it's a combination of things that they want to experience and things that they want to prevent. So combinations of things like, I want to be able to afford this house in this locale. I want to be able to help my parents. I want to be able to help my children. I want to be able to start this business and really give it everything that it's going to need from me while it's getting launched. So those things that you want to bring into being and that your dreams and hopes are centered around, that's part of it for most of us. And then there's also the things the outcomes that we want some help in preventing. How do I prevent being destitute at the end of my days? How do I prevent losing these things that are important to me? How do I prevent unnecessary decline? So for most of us, there is this combination of things we want to experience and things we really don't want to experience. And when most financial kind of products were coming through the sales channel, I think it was very much the personality of the salesperson, whatever he or she was driving at, that would determine which of those things the promotion or the prevention focus would dominate. But as we get more into creating skilled financial planners who have the ability to engage all aspects of the client, they are learning how to take the client's lead, to hear about, are they primarily prevention focused or promotion focused? And learning skills for addressing things that the client may not have thought of, but needs to think of. And so there's, in the end, everybody just wants to know that they're going to be okay. Even if they're struggling right now, that there's going to be an end to this, and that in the end, whatever the hard things are that you guys might be asking them to do, that in the end, it's going to be worth it.
Yeah. Now, following on from that, there are a couple of specific things that I know that you talk about in your book that I wanted to chat to you about. And that is one of the things, the first thing is to talk about the differences in how, if you're dealing with a couple, when you're giving advice, obviously different people have different experiences in life and they have different levels of confidence, particularly, as well as knowledge when it comes to financial advice. Do you have any advice for, on specific instances that you could share that where financial planners and advisors could improve the way that they deal with clients and couples?
Yeah, folks have, I think there's been an awareness that confidence and competence are sometimes spuriously correlated, which, yes, they go together. And one would hope that if you're not good at something, you would have the self-awareness to know that you're not good at that, and therefore you would not be confident in acting on it. But they're not perfectly correlated, that's for sure. And in particular, men sometimes get socialized into believing that they have to pretend they're all that, and that they know more than what they may feel confident of. But whether it's a gender-based issue or not, I think that's something we need to be aware of in financial planning meetings, is that we engage both people in the room and be willing to say, where do you feel really secure about the things that we're doing? Is there anything that we've talked about today that's leaving you feeling uncertain or unsure? Where have I been unclear? Is there anything that you want to dig into a little bit more or learn about a little bit more? Can I give you any resources? And then make sure you're giving them, not your college textbooks, but things that are written at the advisory level. What often comes out of a good meeting with a couple, or if you're doing family work, is that people come out of those meetings having a sense of knowing their partner even better than they did before they went into the meeting with you. So in other words, they're not just disclosing to you, they're disclosing to each other.
Yeah.
my friend Michael Kitces has remarked ironically that financial planners, however, often introduce a non-trivial amount of conflict into couples' lives, so that, you look out your office window and you see them arguing in the car after their meeting. So being able to kind of welcome disagreement into the room and to normalize it and to say, it would be kind of weird if everybody were in agreement on everything. What kinds of disagreements feel safe? Are there ones that kind of feel a little more fraught, a little more dangerous, or in some ways unmanageable, that you want to give me the heads up on before I dive in where angels fear to tread? There's lots of different ways of asking these questions that that say, look, I'm in this for the long run. This is going to be a progressive kind of revelation over the years. And if it's too much for today's meeting, let's come back to it another day.
Yeah. And as most of our listeners know, my husband's also a financial planner, and we sought advice from a financial planner ourselves. They gave us a few questions to think about. And one of the questions was, where if something happened to one of you, would the other person stay in the same house, or would they move? If you could move anywhere, where would you move to? And at the same time, we named a particular city in the UK that we both wanted to move to, that ended up being 450 miles apart. And even though we were both very shocked, it was interesting that we hadn't had that discussion.
Yeah. I mean, that is one of the beautiful offerings of a really good financial planner, is that they get you thinking about things beyond just the end of your nose. That they get you thinking about things that really do help meaningful conversations and imaginings to happen after people leave the office with you. And in fact, to just get clarity on what matters and whether you should be taking action on it now. Yeah.
And just opening up the conversation was, in that safe environment is a really positive step forward, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are very, especially now that people often don't give themselves an hour a week in some sort of spiritual place where there's people asking you to reflect on things like the meaning of life. In some ways, I think financial planners are one of the few professions that are being trained to ask those questions. What matters to you? What are your values?
Yeah.
What would it feel like to not be living in integrity with that? What gets in the way of that? How does money play a role in this beautiful life that you want to create? So it is this, I know that you and I have noodled before about what is the difference between, or what is the overlap between psychology and financial planning and these deeper issues of meaning. And I would say there is considerable overlap.
Yeah. There absolutely is. I agree completely. And one of the other aspects, which I can't let you go without talking about, is it's clients going through major life transitions. And, as a follow-on from everything that we've discussed so far today, are there any extra things that financial planners can do when it comes to helping our clients through those particularly difficult times, the difficult situations, other than, everything we've said about, giving them that safer environment that they can lean in to feel what they need to feel and express it?
Yes, boy, my mind's going in a million different directions. I guess one thing is just for the advisors to be aware of, which is that, transitions last as long as transitions last. There isn't a magical, 1 year of widowhood and then you're ready to make decisions with greater clarity. For some people, decision-making capacity is never offline. They've had time to be thinking about things, and they're very happy to stay engaged in their financial planning life. They don't need to be they don't need those things to be taken over for them by well-meaning planners. And in other people, they, the journey through grief may be years and years and years. And so there's beautiful training on this offered through the Financial Transitionist Institute that trains advisors on how to be good companions for people. It's not planning as usual. You have to make space for much more dealing with uncertainty, because transitions by their very nature take people away from what it is they've already known and put them into a place of not knowing at least something. It's newness, right? You transition from not being a parent to being a parent. You transition from having all of your days and your decisions and your schedules determined by what your kids are doing, and then you're an empty nester. You're a business owner and you're a captain of industry, and then you retire and you are neither of those things anymore. Mm-hmm. And so identity takes a while to recover or to kind of re-equilibrate. And so there are specific skills that financial professionals can learn for accompanying people in transition. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, I could talk to you all day, Moira. I know that we're nearly out of time, but there is so much that we have to learn still about ourselves as individuals, giving advice to our clients and how we behave individually and take that information on board, but also with the clients themselves, even just how, what they want for the future, their aspirations, what they want for their children. It's not just a box ticking exercise, is it? It's so much more than that. It's not just running the numbers and doing a cash flow and saying, oh yes, you've got enough money, don't worry about it. It's about how they feel about it, how, what they want out of life, isn't it?
And being able to understand for them, what is the meaning of enough? And when you've run 1,000 different scenarios on, am I going to run out of money or not? And they're still dealing with financial anxiety, having been told that, they could survive 1,000 years on the money they have, then realizing that you've got to have skills for taking the conversation to the next level, because clearly this is not just about the money. Mm. Coming back to where we started, though, that the technical skills that allow people to feel that they can trust you, that you do know what you're talking about. That's kind of almost like the launch pad for everything else that comes. And if you can, if a launch pad is made out of, there's cement and then there's hardening, the cement hardening that you have. And so I just want to come back to, you need both of those things. You need the technical skills and you need the warmth and the empathy and the communication skills that allow clients to launch onto the path of their best lives as they're with you. What most clients don't understand, and this is something that I learned at the age of 13 when my dad died quite suddenly, is that they will be dealing with financial professionals during certainly some of the best and the most exciting times of their life, but also during the very worst days of their life. And so for all of us to be developing the skills that that allow people to look across the table and say, yes, I want her to be the one. I want him to be the one that is with me on this journey. And to know in your bones that you're with the right person. That's kind of the aim of professionals, is that you are their go-to person, no matter what kind of stuff that life has been handing them. That their thought is, I need to talk to Jackie about this.
So many aspects that your book covers, that so many practical aspects that people can gain and, incorporate into, their own behavior when giving financial planning advice to clients, aren't there? So your book is called Advice That Sticks.
It is.
And I will put some links to it in the into the show notes for those people who haven't read it, or if you have read it, delve back in and maybe look at things a little bit differently. Moira, I still have dozens of questions to ask you. I could chat to you all day, but I think we're going to have to stop there. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real privilege to talk to you.
Thank you. It's just been a joy to be with you.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to other people's points of view about different things, all relating to our wonderful financial planning profession. If you know anyone who might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, please pass on our details to them. So that's it from me. Join me again next time when we'll be talking all things certified financial planner related, and also dropping in on our new entrants to the financial planning profession. Bye for now.